8 double column pages and no pictures, unless you buy the edition that has some pictures in it. Josephus was a Jewish general. He served in the Galilee until the Romans began to be victorious, at which point he went over to the Roman side. There are various ways to describe this. I'm not going to go there. Josephus was also a priest. So he had been inside the temple. And in Josephus, the reason somebody like me would read this book is because it is an incredible eyewitness description of what went on here 2,000 years ago. You just have to know to ignore his numbers. Sometimes he gets a little bit carried away, especially when he's talking in the benefit of the Romans. At any rate, Josephus describes the most magnificent building ever built. 3 large rooms, an entrance hall, featuring 4 tall pillars supporting a bar of pure gold. And draped over that bar of pure gold, a stunning golden grapevine that kept growing. Now, how does a golden grapevine grow? No problem. Donations. Bunches of grapes as long as a man is tall. Leaves, vine. It was like taking Fort Knox. You've heard of Fort Knox? And turning it into a stunning work of art. The middle room, a large menorah made out of a block of pure gold. A small golden altar for burning incense. That incense was so incredibly powerful, there was no need for perfume anywhere near Jerusalem. And a very large table, built out of acacia wood covered with gold, that held 12 huge loaves of bread. That bread was put on the table on one Shabbat, and removed a week later on the following Shabbat, when it was eaten by the Kohen priests. Not to worry, it was still fresh and warm. Good trick. So, what was in the back room, the Holy of Holies? Nothing. Had you been in there, assuming you were the high priest on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, you would have seen a lovely marble floor, a perfect square hole, and sticking up out of that square hole 3 finger breadths, the top of our rock. Wait a minute, what about the Ark of the Covenant? That was in the first temple. And when King Solomon built the first temple, he knew it was going to be destroyed. So he built a long, winding tunnel that ended somewhere under the Temple Mount. 400 years later, towards the end of the first temple period, King Josiah, saw the end coming, took the Ark of the Covenant, and hid it away at the end of that tunnel, where, according to the Rambam, it still is today, somewhere under the Temple Mount. Oh. Well, if that's so, why don't we just simply dig in and go find it? We've tried 4 times in the past 40 years. And every time, it seems, there's some sort of major reaction. Blown up buses, I ride to work. Blown up restaurants my children like to eat pizza in. So, I need to teach you 2 more Hebrew words. Savlanut habibi. Patience, dear ones. The time is not yet right. But we know it is here, and we know one man in every generation knows where the Ark is. If you're interested in reading about what sort of person that might be, I recommend you read All for the Boss, about Rav Yankel Yosef Herman, who lived in New York at the turn of the century. Okay, so now we can understand why this part of the Western Wall, this being the modern Western Wall, has become so special. This was always clear, and this is the closest we could get to where the Ark of the Covenant once stood. So we came here to pray. In addition, when the Second Temple was destroyed, we were promised that the Shekhinah, the divine presence, would always reside on the Western Wall. And that's another reason this has become a place of prayer. Because when we came here to pray, to daven, here we felt heard and answered. But the Muslims wanted to protect the city. They raised up the level of their city by building huge arches like these 4 arches. These 4 arches are supporting this building, a madrasa, a Muslim religious school, which is right over our heads, and has been standing there for about 750 years. So, the Western Wall was all covered up and almost forgotten until 1967. An amazing war. For 19 years, we had not been allowed to come to our wall. We used to climb up on top of a building on top of Mount Zion, and we would stand on top of the tallest building and look and hope and think, is that it? Thinking that maybe we were seeing our Western Wall. Finally, June 1967, we came running back. What a celebration! What pleasure, what joy! And we cleaned off this entire plaza in front, building a lovely place where people could easily come up to the Western Wall. Every year, 8 million people are attracted to our Western Wall to pray, as if by a magnet. Because the Second Temple was a house of prayer for all people. People who came here were sure to have their prayers answered. As we're walking north by the Western Wall, take use of that special blessing. We also dug south, Robinson's Arch. Benjamin Mazar uncovered this part of the Western Wall, and people now come here to pray also. But then we began wondering, well, what's north? So let me pull off the tops of these buildings, showing you where you began your tour and Warren exited alive. We passed all these new digs. This is the arch we stood under, and you are now sitting right here on this white light, looking straight ahead at the rebuilt Western Wall. From here up, it was rebuilt 1,300 years ago. Why? What happened 1,300 years ago? Before the Crusades, exactly, the early Muslims. This is when the Dome of the Rock was built. And before they could build the Dome of the Rock, they had to rebuild Jerusalem. I'll explain why in a few minutes. But they had to rebuild the bridges and the walls. So, we are sitting under these buildings, and we're going to be walking north under these buildings. But where is the ground? About 30 feet under where we're sitting, 10 meters.
Wow.
These are the mikvahs we were looking at. So our plan for the morning is to walk straight across the face of the Western Wall. Under our feet, bedrock will be rising, until finally at the very end, we will be standing and walking through the bedrock of the Antonia Fortress. This is the only place we'll be walking underground. The rest of the time, it's above ground and under buildings. So, our Second Temple was a house of prayer for all people. That meant lots and lots and lots of pilgrims would be arriving to Jerusalem all the time. So lots of pilgrims have lots of needs. A street was built at the base of the wall. It was filled with shops. And this is where the pilgrims could get breakfast, lunch, dinner, possibly a new pair of sandals, maybe a lovely silver necklace to take home as a present. This became the ancient economic center, and it was a street built by the wall, so I hope you don't mind if I call it Wall Street. The original. We're going to be standing on the original Wall Street right here, near the end of our tour. Herod built a fortress north of our temple called the Antonia. The Antonia was ostensibly built to protect the temple, but look at those 4 towers. Which tower is the tallest? That was built for spying into the temple courtyard, to make sure that nobody was gathering a rebellion or some sort of revolt. Remember, Herod was paranoid. And it was called the Antonia, named after Mark Antony, the Roman Caesar. Why would Herod do that?
To appease the
To curry favor, for sure, because Herod had been made king of the Jews by a Roman Caesar. Interesting fellow, this Herod. This is our bridge that we just stood under. This is what it looked like 2,000 years ago, and this is Robinson's Arch. It was a stunning stairway that led all the way down to Wall Street, which goes south, down to the city of David. This is the original Western Wall, with the modern Western Wall in context. And Herod did a lot of building. This was a royal basilica that Herod built to entertain his Greek friends. Why? Herod wasn't Jewish.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, this tiny little fence here was built to keep non-Jews from going into the temple. It would not have been very healthy for them. So there were warnings put here in Greek and Roman and various other languages, and non-Jews would come here to pray and get their prayers answered immediately. Jews, once they were ritually pure, could go further on into the temple, but that meant Herod couldn't go past this fence. Oh, how embarrassing. So, he built this lovely royal basilica, where he entertained all his Greek friends. Stunning banquets featuring the fine wines of Israel. Why, there's certain wines we make better than anybody else, and Herod knew that, and took advantage of it. Wine, grapes, pomegranates, dates, beautiful harp music. By the time you finished with that sort of a banquet, you didn't even realize you hadn't gone into the temple courtyard. Good solution, Herod. I'll give him that much. The Lishkat Gazit, the Supreme Court, this is where the rabbis sat and taught Torah. At nighttime, the temple was lit and guarded by the Levium. This was the women's courtyard, where once a year during Sukkot, a week-long holiday in the fall, the rabbis would juggle flaming torches. Now, how does a rabbi who's been sitting and studying Torah his whole life, keep 8 flaming torches up in the air? No idea, but that's the power of learning Torah. Early in the morning, a Levi would be standing on this tower, looking across the eastern horizon, waiting for the first glimmer of light, at which point, when he saw it, he would shout out, Bar Kaim! And the service in the temple would begin for that day. And may we all merit soon to see a new light shine on Zion. Any questions? That's our temple. That was our temple. And now I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to follow me down.